Okay, lesson 7. The subject today is Santosha. Santosha is the practice of contentment. Contentment means being satisfied regardless of the circumstances that you find yourself in. So that is that's yoga's way of positive thinking. I will try to explain a little bit how that works, because we live in a very challenging world. The world has changed very rapidly in the past 200 years. And the biggest development is, of course, the economic development. And the challenge that many people are dealing with these days is the challenge of wanting. There is so much available in this world. If you have money, you can get anything. But there are many people that don't have the means to obtain everything that they want. Most people can't. And so, because there is so much available that we could wish for, but are not able to obtain, it causes restlessness. It causes what we are talking about in yoga, of course, is that the restlessness, the disruption, the disturbance causes disharmony. And that does not allow our crown chakra to function properly or at all. It's very simple to understand. When there is nothing available, there is nothing to desire. So you can have peace with that, right? My mom was born between the First and the Second World War, and there was a time of poverty. There was a huge worldwide, a global economic crisis between the First and the Second World War. So a lot of people lived in poverty, including my mom. There were lots of big families at that time. Contraception didn't exist yet, so there were lots of big families, 6, 7, 10, 12 children per family. And they had very little financial means to live. My mom, while I was growing up, also in a big family, 7 children, I have 6 siblings, my mom frequently said, before the war, people were much happier. So what she was trying to say is, we have everything now, but people are always complaining. People are always unhappy. She said, when we had nothing, we were much happier. And that is what I'm trying to explain. If there is nothing to obtain, if there is nothing available to get, to desire, it's easy to accept, and you're in peace with the fact that there is nothing. But when there is so much available, as you see in the modern commercial world that we now live in these days, full of abundance, everything is available in abundance, in large amounts, and of every imaginable and unimaginable kind, there's a lot to desire. And if you're not in control of your desire, even though you're not lacking anything, you have enough to eat, you have a warm house in the winter, you have a cool house in the summer with air conditioning, still many people are very unsatisfied with their lives because there is so much that they want that they can't afford, that they can't get. So that is why contentment is important to introduce into our lives. And for me, that always means that when When I am confronted with dissatisfaction or desire to get something that I can't get, I always compare myself with other people. And I do not compare myself with the people who have more than I have. I compare myself with people who have less than I have. I have a car. There are many people who can't afford to have a car. So I'm lucky. Yes, I would like to have a more luxurious car. My ideal is to have a Porsche. It's one of the best engineered cars in the world. It's a child's dream, a boy's dream. And yet, I always laugh at the idea of having a car like that. Because you can't even go shopping in your Porsche. It doesn't have a trunk big enough to carry your shopping bags. I have 2 dogs. Where am I going to put my dogs? It barely has a rear seat where people can sit or dogs can stay. And it's a very expensive car. Not only just to get the car, but also the insurance, very expensive. Maintenance, if you need to go to the service center for repair, very expensive. So having a car like that might seem like a dream, but it's just a headache. So I remind myself that, and the car that I'm driving, a Kia Sportage, I love every time that I drive this car. I'm so happy about it. In all aspects, it has lots of storage space in the interior, in the trunk, huge space. It's very comfortable. Heated seats, cooled seats, air conditioner. So I don't need anything more than that. And I would like to live in I live in Shibom apartment. It's the oldest apartment in Korea. It was the first Western apartment built in Korea, more than 50 years old. Almost 60 years old now, 50, yeah, in the early 1970s it was built. So, compared with new apartments like Chai apartment or Hyundai or Samsung Remia, of course, those apartments newly built are very nicely built, very solid, very, very luxurious kitchen, luxurious bathroom. But I live in Yeouido. The park is just across the street, just in front of Yuksam building, 63 building. I live in an apartment. So I think when I feel unsatisfied and I think I want to live in a nicer house, I think there's so many people who live in Panchiha, in a dark half basement house. There are so many people who live in house. My house is not that big, but there are many people who live in a house that is small, almost the size of my bathroom. There are many of these very super small houses in Seoul where people live in these very cramped conditions with no daylight. So I count my blessings. The practice of contentment is positive thought, regardless of the circumstances that you find yourself in. It also means to count your blessings, as opposed to complaining about what you don't have, about what you're lacking. Now, in the first paragraph, you see that the starting point for developing Santosha, or contentment, is Saucha, purity, which was the first Niyama that we learned last week. Now, why is that? That is because around the world there are religions and cultures that use the concept of contentment as an excuse to be lazy. My granddad was a little bit like that. I remember as a child, every Sunday, the whole family, 7 children, my mom and dad, 9 people, we would visit my granddad. And I was still a little child. But what I clearly remember from those visits every Sunday is my granddad being very content. He had his own chair, and he would sit in that chair, seeing his grandchildren crawling over the floor and you know, being boisterous, laughing and chattering, and he would just look very content. He had this very content expression on his face. And at some point, the box of cigars would come out, and he would light a big cigar, a torpedo cigar, which he would greatly enjoy, filling up the room with blue clouds of smoke. And next, the bottle of Geneva would come out. Geneva is a cheap Dutch liquor that is also called the poor man's cognac, because it's just really cheap. It is not naturally produced. So poor people drink Geneva, and to make it taste good, he would then put a sugar cube in his glass, and he would drink the Geneva. Just one glass, very austere, but very satisfied and content. But my mom told many stories about her father, my grandfather, and he may have been very content, but his whole family suffered because of that. His wife and his children had nothing to eat. And they lived off of food stamps, which they would receive from the government. And my mom used to tell us that when they got eggs, they would boil 2 or 3 eggs, they would cut them in parts of 4, and each child would get a quarter of an egg. When they had milk, they would mix 1 liter of milk with 1 liter of water, so they had 2 liters of milk. So they really lived in poverty. And my granddad, he didn't really work. He repaired shoes, kudu shoe repair. He did that at home. It earned very little money, but what also happened is they had to move several times because the noise of the shoe repair made other neighbors complain. So my granddad, very content as he was, he didn't have a sense of responsibility to his family, to provide a good life to his family. So what I'm saying here is that many people, East and West alike, of all cultures, they use contentment as an excuse to be lazy. That is why in the first paragraph I said that the starting point of contentment is the practice of purity. And purity, as I explained last week, covers all the previous yamas. So if you use the practice of contentment, if you use contentment, the concept of contentment as an excuse for laziness, which is of course subconscious, that is why people basically fall into that trap, it is violating at least 1 or 2 of the yamas, especially non-lying, of course, because you are just fooling yourself into thinking that being lazy is a form of contentment, which is a lie, of course. So that is the reason why practice of purity forms the basis for contentment. When we The reason why contentment is important is because when we are dissatisfied, or when we find ourselves in unfavorable conditions, situations, like failing a test or losing our job or a relationship, we have a tendency to fight the situation that we find ourselves in. And that is a natural reaction, is an instinctive reaction, but from our point of view, energy is our most important asset, most valuable asset. And when energy gets blocked, because we become tensed, because we are full of anxiety or full of desire, energy gets blocked and everything gets stuck. And also, if a solution is needed, if a situation requires development leading to a solution or change, it doesn't come as long as we are stuck. Practicing contentment means, first and foremost, in a situation where you are struck by misfortune, that you first and foremost accept the situation as it is, as opposed to resisting and fighting against it. Again, that's the natural response. That's the natural impulse to resist and find it difficult to accept, causing lots of pain as a result. But most important is it blocks the energy and keeps a solution from presenting itself. The moment that you accept what is happening, regardless of the severity of the situation, energy starts to flow, allowing you to function in the crown chakra, which allows you to see the essence of the situation. And the moment that you see the essence of a problem that you are dealing with, it's not a problem anymore, because as soon as you realize the essence of a problem, the solution presents itself. You know what to do next in a very natural way. That is where the word epiphany comes from. And that only happens when you function in the crown chakra. It then happens rather naturally and spontaneously, without much effort. As long as we resist and we fight and find it hard to accept, we spend a lot of time and energy, especially, being miserable, resisting the inevitable, without being able to find a solution. So contentment sounds like a luxury item, but it's actually crucial if we want to be on the spiritual path, to maintain our peace of mind and our ability to function in the crown chakra. Contentment is a very big asset, a very important tool to stay on the path, to stay in the right condition. And in a practical sense, it allows us to be troubleshooters. It allows us to, when presented with problems, with trouble, with difficult situations, it allows us to quickly come to the essence of what is going on, and based on that find a solution to the problem. So it has huge practical value. In the last paragraph, you see something about dealing with bad habits. And I wrote there, when you do things that you actually do not agree with and you do not know how to transform it or kick the bad habit, do not fight against it. When you fight, you block yourself. If you are able to accept it and have relative peace with it, you will learn from it, you will become aware. and like I just said before, you find a solution. This applies not only bad habits. People then think about addictions, which it does apply to, bad habits, but bad habit also covers the issue which we have talked about before, when you are stuck in a job that you don't like, but also feel that you can't quit. Because you need the income, you need to pay the bills. You need to take care of your family if you have a family. If you don't have a family, still you have to pay the rent. You have to be able to eat and pay the supermarket bills. So most people, the majority of the people, I dare say, are in fact in that situation where they are in a job, they feel they are they're being absorbed by their job. They work many hours. They feel they have very little time for themselves. In the weekend they are tired, recovering, and on Monday the whole cycle starts again. There are many people I hear complaining about that. They are not happy. They don't really like their job, and yet they find it impossible to quit. That is also under the umbrella of the bad habit. And what is also under the umbrella of the bad habit is being in a relationship that you feel is not a proper relationship anymore. When you start feeling that you're stuck in the relationship. When that happens, if you force yourself out of the job, or if you force yourself out of an improper relationship, it's a form of violence. So you're violating the principle of ahimsa. Rather than forcing change, which always leads to more disruption, mayhem, it is better to first practice contentment by counting your blessings. At least I have a job. There are many jobless people. And they can't afford to live in a house on their own. They have to live with their parents, or they have to live with people that they don't like, maybe, as a roommate, or so count your blessings first, accept the situation as it is, and while your energy keeps circulating, allowing you to function in the crown chakra, you will be inspired to find an occupation, a job that you feel more attracted to, that you feel more passionate about. This often means that you need to educate yourself. So the point here is that essential change, big change, if we force it, it causes a lot of disruption and actually often makes things worse. Also affects other people. While if we do it the yoga way, we start with contentment, we count our blessings, and from there we orientate ourselves towards something that we feel more connected with, that we feel more enthusiastic about. And because that requires time, it requires planning, careful planning, step by step. And when it comes to a job, it often involves re-education. We need to re-educate ourselves. So it takes time. But if we can approach it in this way, we not only fulfill our deepest wishes, change towards something that is much more in line with our true self, but it also prevents us from creating negative waves, karma. When we force change, we create karma, and it will always, one way or another, bounce back on us. Especially when it comes to relationships. Many relationships end with fighting and pain, suffering. While if you do it the yoga way, you take your responsibility, you ended up in that relationship for a reason, you realize that, you take your responsibility, and you take your time. And you will see, if you're patient, that the relationship eventually will just, it will burn up, it will bleed out. And you can then amicably, in a friendly way, you can say to each other, hey, this is not meant to be, it looks like it is over. Let's just move on. Each our separate ways. And in that way, you have a friend for life that knows you very deeply, much more than other people, because they have lived with you and loved you. But also you avoid a lot of pain and hard feelings between you and your partner or ex-partner. So that is the yoga way. All right, questions? No? All right. Then let's have a short break.